Hello and welcome to this video. In this session we're going to look at the concept of diatonic chords and a better way of playing them or practicing them, and to have a look at the basic introduction to the concept of voice leading. So firstly, let's start off with a diatonic scale. We're going to use the C major scale as the example, so C, D, E, F, G, A and B. Now to form the diatonic chords off of these is relatively simple. We just take the third and the fifth. So for example, on the C, the note that's a third higher is the E, and the note that's a fifth higher is the G. So we can form our first triad, or three-note chord, using those notes. We then do the same thing for each of the following chords. So the D would be D, F, and A. So we do the same thing with this, and we carry on. We have E, G, and B, F, A, and C, G, B, and D, A, C, and E, and finally B, D, and F. The next thing we look at is the quality of those chords. So I'm going to write this in to begin with. The quality of these chords are the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are all major. This is when we form the diatonic triads off of a major scale. The 2, the 3, and the 6 are all minor. And finally the 7 is diminished. So we can go ahead and modify those chords. Let's just change these chord symbols here. So this will be a D minor chord, this will be an E minor chord, an A minor chord, and a B diminished. So there's our 7 chords that we form off of the C major scale. C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. Now, a way you could practice those is just to go through and play those chords. So you're getting an understanding of the harmony that's associated with that key. So the harmony associated with C major is those 7 diatonic chords. A better way of practicing these is to practice them around some kind of cycle, and we're going to do this with the cycle of fourths. There's a couple of reasons. Firstly, it sounds a little bit more musical than just playing the chords stepping up from one scale degree to the next. And secondly, it gives us the ability to introduce the concept of voice leading and thinking more intelligently about the way we voice chords. So to begin with, we're going to write in numerically here the order that we would play these chords if we were playing them around a cycle of fourths. So the first chord would be the C. We then play the chord that's a fourth higher, which is the F. So this will become our second chord. We then play a fourth higher again, which is the B diminished. So this will become our third chord. A fourth higher than that is the E minor. So that becomes our fourth. Then the A minor, which is our fifth. The D minor, which is the sixth. The G major, which is the seventh. And then finally back to our start point. We can think of that as 8 or a second 1. So if we look at that, what we will end up with is a set of chords or a progression that is C major, F major, B diminished, E minor, A minor, D minor, G major, and then finally back to C. So what we have there is a cycle, round fourths. We travel through every single step. By using the cycle of fourths, we get back to our starting position of C. So let's switch over to the stave and see how we could go about forming these chords and look at this concept of voice leading, which will lead to more pleasant sounding movements between chords. Okay, for simplicity's sake, I've not put this onto a grand staff. We're just looking at the treble stave, and we're just looking at simple 3-note voicings of each of these chords. Now you'll notice I put the root notes of each chord in here. So this is our cycle that we just worked out from the diagram before, and these are the root notes of each of these chords. So our C, F, B for the B diminished, E minor, A minor, D minor, G major, and back to C. So what we're going to look at when we voice these chords is we're going to take a look at, as I say, this idea of voice leading. And this basically leads from looking for commonalities between chords. Let's start off with an example, and this will make more sense as we go. So we're going to fill this chord up. So we said before, if we have the C, we're just going to play the third and the fifth above, and that completes our C major chord. If we move on to our next chord, the 3 notes are F, A, and C. So one of the things we're going to look for is a commonality between the C major and the F major chord. That common note is the C. So the C exists in the C major. It also exists in the F major. So let's have our C there, which means that we've now got the C and the F. The note that we're missing is the A. So we'll place that there. Now, if you take a look at those 2 chords, you can see our C has stayed where it is. Let's just take a look here. So this C has stayed exactly where it is. And if you look, the E has moved up by step to the F. The G has moved up by step to the A. So we've got relatively small movements. We tried to reduce the amount of movement of each individual part. If you think of each of these notes within the chord as separate lines, imagine 3 singers singing these notes. The bottom singer is going to be just singing the C. The middle singer will be singing the E, moving up to the F. The top voice will sing the G, moving up to the A. Okay, so let's carry on. So we're going to have a look from the F major chord to the B diminished. So in B diminished, the notes we have are B, D, and F. So again, the F is common. We can keep that, which means we now have the B and the F. The note we're missing is the D. Well, let's put this here. And again, let's have a look at the movement of what's happened here. So the F has remained constant. The C has moved up by step to the D. And the A has moved up by step to the B. So again, if you think about these as individual voice parts, you'll see the movements are very, very smooth. Okay, so let's carry on. So if we get to the E minor chord, we've got E, G, and B as the notes. Well, the B is there in the previous chord, so let's keep that. And we just need to fill in the G. So there's our E minor chord. We get to the next chord is an A minor chord, so our notes are A, C, and E. Well, we have an E from the previous chord, so leave that where it is. So we now have the E and the A. The note we're missing is the C. There's our A minor chord. Moving on to the D minor chord, same thing. What notes do we need? D, F, and A. Well, the A is already there from the previous chord, and we just need the F to complete the chord. At G major, we have notes of G, B, and D. Well, the D is already there from the previous chord, and the note we're missing is the B. And then finally, back to the C major chord, the common note is the G. The C, E, and G of C major contains a G in the previous chord, and the note we're missing is the E. Okay, so there's our simple voicings on those diatonic chords. If we have a listen back to it, you'll notice that there's a relatively smooth movement. I'm not saying this is the best voicing or the most musical or ideal voicing. And in terms of voicing chords, a lot will have to do with your melody note, which I'll cover in another video. But for now, it's just looking at ways you can practice these chords, practice the diatonic chords within any given key. Do it in a reasonably musical fashion. And there's another reason why we use the circle of fifths, which I'll come back to in a second, but let's just have a listen. Okay, so you can hear from that everything is relatively smooth movement. You'll hear it's got this constant rising feel all the way through. And we've begun here on a G top note and ended up on this E a sixth above later on, or at the end of the progression. And the reason for that rising feel is, of course, if we look at any two of these chords, they're all moving by the same interval. They're all moving by a perfect fourth. So if we take a look at any of these chords, you'll see that one note stays the same and the other two notes rise by step, and it's the same everywhere. So here, for example, the F to the B diminished, the F stays the same and the other two voices rise by step. So that's why we have that constant rising feeling. Between any two chord pairs, one note stays the same and the other two rise by step. Just as an aside, if we were cycling around the circle of fifths, we'd have the opposite situation. One note would stay the same and the other two notes would move downwards by step. It's just an idiosyncrasy of the cycle of fifths as opposed to the cycle of fourths. Now, I mentioned before another reason for why practicing around the cycle of fourths is a good idea. This gets into the idea of what we call temporary dominance. So if we imagine any chord, for example, this C chord here, let's work backwards. So we're going to begin with this C chord at the end. The 5 chord of C major is the G. If we were to go back to our diagram and take a look as we did before, the 5 chord of C major is G. So that takes us to the C. It's a 5-1 movement. Just looking at the root notes, so not necessarily worried about the chords, but just the root notes. G to C is the 5-1. D to G is 5-1 if you imagine G being the 1 chord. So if G is now our 1, D is our 5th step. If D is our 1, A is our 5th step. If A is a 1, E is our 5th step, and so on and so on. So you basically got this constant thing of 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, and so on and so on. That 5-1 movement here at the end here, for example, is the perfect cadence. The 5-1, the 5 major chord to the 1 major chord is the perfect cadence. It's got that kind of feeling of wanting to continue. This is another reason why practicing around a cycle of fourths is a good idea. 5-1 movements are really common in music, so you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. You're learning the chords, you're learning how to start voice leading, and we're also looking at a very, very common progression or a segment of a progression in a lot of different chord progressions you'll come across, this 5-1. It's a really common, really strong movement. Anyway, so I hope that's given you a little bit of an insight into how you can go about looking at diatonic chords. It's my opinion, and not just mine. There are other musicians who would, I imagine, would agree with this, but the essence of a tonality is the harmony that it embodies. So for example, if you're learning the tonality of C major, it's not really about the scale. It's about the harmony that's derived from the scale. So by starting to understand these chords, you're getting a much better understanding of the tonal quality of any tonality. So in this case, C major. Anyway, as I say, I hope that's been useful. Please subscribe to the channel, like and share the video with your friends. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again and see you in the next one.